Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 4.1, Music and Language. In this lecture, we will talk about the relationship between music and language. As we all know, here are some similarities between music and language, and here we give some examples. First, both music and language are ubiquitous in human societies, and they also present rich cultural variations. So in all known human societies, music and language emerged in the human daily lives, and also the presentation or manifestation of language and music are different in different cultural niches. They both involve sound, and the sound falls in a similar frequency range. So if you remember the equal loudness contour we discussed before, that our human ears are most sensitive to the mid frequencies between 1000 hertz to 10,000 hertz. So both language and music fall within this range that's most frequently appeared in our daily lives. So they both involve interpersonal communication that tends to be multimodal. So language and music both affords the functionality of communication and interpersonal interactions. They are often combined and may exist on a continuum. For example, poetry shares the semantic meaning of language, and it also shares the rhythmic attributes of in a musical perspective. And music sometimes works as a speech surrogate to express certain information, especially when the information is indirect, and also to express emotions and feelings. Another example is tone language, which is a kind of pitched language where that language shares the melodiness of music. And all these examples showcase that music and language they can be combined in different forms, and they can exist on a continuum. Um, they both are acquired early and with little effort, and becoming bilingual or bimusical later in life is more challenging. So this points to the fact that the ability to learn language and music are somehow innate in our human nature. And when we were first exposed to the world in our early lives, it's much easier for us to acquire the ability of music and language. And also, as we grow up, as we grow up later in life, it's more challenging to learn new language and music. They both have rules for combining elements. So both language and music are humanly organized sound. It's just they follow different principles to organize sound as language and music. For example, in language, words and sentences, they are formulated or arranged in certain ways, following certain rules or grammars. In music, the tones, melodies, and musical phrases also observe certain principles that's specified by certain social cultural context. So, although the principles are different from culture to culture, but to acquire a specific musical meaning that's situated in that culture. It requires a shared sense or a common sense of of the it shares a common sense of doing music in that culture to form the melody, the musical phrases, and the tones. They both can be notated, but don't have to be. Learning to read both involves explicit instruction. So, um, both language and music can be abstracted and symbolized. So, this kind of symbolization or abstraction is something we always do to the actions, the things in our daily lives. But also, this notated music more points to the Western classical music. For the world's music, we can find a way to write them down, but it's usually inaccurate, which cannot reflect the essence of that music. If the notation is not designed very well to that system. But in whatever way, we can find a way to notate or write down both language and music. And also learning to read these notations involve explicit instructions, which means we need to learn, we need to explicitly learn how to read um, the symbols representing language and music. So they both use prosody and intonational phrasing. So they both use the tone of voice and also a certain intonational phrasing, both when we speak and when we sing. So although music tends to use fixed and discrete pitch, which specifies the scale, the music scales. So in different culture, in different communities, the musical scales are designed differently. But but for that specific culture, when the musicians compose, they tend to use this discrete musical scale. But for language, when we speak, there is usually no specified tone or specific pitch we have to be on. They both show some overlap in skills development. Musical training provides benefits to language learning, including reading skills. And home language speakers and bilinguals perform better on a variety of music perception tasks. This means that language and music share certain skill development, and there is some commonality between the ability, the skill to do music and language. And also, certain studies show that if a person does well on one task of language or music, they tend to perform well on the other task. And they both express basic emotions similarly. For active emotions such as happiness, anger, fear, um, it usually corresponds to loud, fast, and more pitch variation. And for less active emotions such as sadness, tenderness, it always corresponds to soft, slow, and less pitch variation. So this expression is shared among all human beings. So when we feel some strong or active emotions, we almost always express them with loud, fast, and more pitch variation. On the contrary, when we feel sad and tender and emotional, um, we tend to use like all human beings across cultures, uh, we tend to use soft, slow, and less pitch variation. So these are the similarities between language and music. But what about the differences? In this table, it lists several differences between language and music. The first is that language is semantic or referential, which means language is always referencing to something in the external world. So there is some always an object, a theme, or something tangible that's related to language. But music is more evocative. So music is meant to express emotions, and there's nothing really referential, like explicitly referential to a musical piece. And language is more about message transmission, which means there is certain information, there is a message that's be communicated, uh, be conveyed by language. But for music, it's more about temporal experiences. So the meaning in music is always opaque. So for language, the meaning is the most important thing, and it's almost always explicitly stated. But in music, deriving the meaning is difficult, and what is expressing is always opaque and ambiguous, and it's more about express emotions. So in language, there are certain verb tenses, such as past, present, and future. So for language, the the explicit grammar dominates the formation of language. Although in music we also have grammar, but that grammar is less explicit or less or somehow ambiguous. So for in terms of the grammaticality, language definitely strong, more strongly relies on the grammars. But in music, we talked before that the usage of repetition is somehow shared in all world musics, and uh, and the repetition functions as certain affordance in music across cultures, and we tend to use this repetitive structure to um, to form our music. And also sometimes we use quotation or sampling in music to as a form or structure to convey musical meanings. And language emphasizes turn taking, which means when two people are talking to each other, you usually take turns. So we talk one after the other. But music invites a participatory orientation, which means when a group of musicians are present, they tend to play together, um, where their music are synchronized. So they tend to play synchronously all together. It's called collective improvisation or collective performance. So both music and language can be considered as some expressive culture. So music and language are crucial to social bonding, which means they both functions as certain affordances to enhance social cohesion. They are nourished, negotiated, and sustained by communities, which means they are culture socially specific. So in different communities, in different societies, we tend to the people tend to maintain and sustain their music in their music and language in their own ways within that cultural niche. And we learn through immersion and exposure in families, communities, and societies to acquire the our understanding and ability for language and music. This is known as the explicit cultural learning, where we where we are immersed in certain culture, in certain environments, and we learn the things implicitly. So it's not always explicitly instructed, but once we are immersed in that culture, in that environment, with our families, with our communities, we learn those, we acquire these abilities naturally as human beings. And the mass media and new media play increasingly prominent roles. So, so nowadays, the mass media and new media are kind of changing or shape our usage, preferences, and tastes, both in music and language. So now we want to talk about like when we do the musical or language research, what's the relationship between the two terms? First, if we study music as language, there is a really important theory called a generative theory of tonal music, abbreviated as GTTM. It's a seminal musical analytical framework for tonal music. And it's developed by music theorist Fred Lerdahl and linguist Ray Jekendorf. So this monumental work actually lays the foundation for a treatment, a grammatical treatment of music using the language. So this theory adopts a stance analogous to that taken in the study of language by the School of Generative Transformational Grammar, mostly widely known through the work of Noam Chomsky. So Noam Chomsky is a figure in developing these formal language grammars. And I think the most famous is the Chomsky hierarchy. The grammar is not only for natural language, but also for computer science, the computer languages. So, so this work, this theory, GTTM, actually adopts the generative transformational grammar developed by Noam Chomsky and use this framework to analyze tonal musical pieces. It specifies a structural description for any tonal piece. That is, the structure that the experienced listener infers in his hearing of the piece. So GTTM gives a structural description for any tonal piece. And this structure is specified by experienced listener, which means the listener is enculturated to this culture, which is Western classical music. So we assume that the listener has certain appreciation and understanding of the tonal system. And when such a listener listens to the tonal piece, the structure derived in his or her mind would be described by GTTM. So the ultimate goal is an understanding of musical cognition, a psychological phenomenon. Although this theory is named generative theory of tonal music, And the main subject that's studied in this book is the tonal pieces. But the way the theories are formulated is actually more general, and it affords the ability to describe uh, um, a general understanding of musical cognition, which serves as a psychological phenomenon that can be applied to all kinds of musics. But it requires certain generalization from this original GTTM framework. So in terms of the generative grammar, we give one example here of what is the generative grammar in the linguistic studies. So this picture gives a syntax constituent parsing tree. So you can see the tree is formed in a hierarchical structure. And we will get back to this example later. So first, generative grammar is a research tradition in linguistics that aims to explain the cognitive basis of language by formulating and testing explicit models of humans' subconscious grammatical knowledge. A parse tree, as presented here, is an ordered, rooted tree that represents the syntactic structure of a string according to some context-free grammar. So the context-free grammar is a kind of grammar that's developed in the Chomsky hierarchy, and this is the grammar that can be described by a hierarchical parsing tree and shares the most hierarchical essence among all other grammars. So in this example, we can see that the sentence is, I prefer the morning flight through Denver. And taking this one sentence, we're actually assigning different structural importance to the words. So from the beginning, from the root, the sentence is divided into a noun phrase and a verb phrase. So noun phrase become a pronoun, which is I, and the verb phrase is further decomposed into a verb and another noun phrase. So the verb is I prefer. So the idea is I prefer what. So you can see this hierarchical level layer by layer when we doing this reduction of the original sentence. So for I prefer what, this noun phrase is further decomposed into a determiner and a nominal. So the determiner is and the nominal is further developed to smaller elements. So it's composed by another nominal, which is morning flight, and then it uses a prepositional phrase like through Denver. So you can see this sentence is structured and decomposed by this constituency grammar. And this constituency grammar gives us a hierarchical parsing tree where we can decide the different structural importance of different words. So later on, when we talk about the GTTM framework, we will see a similar structure, similar parsing tree as this in terms of tonal musical piece. So what is GTTM? First, whereas music characteristically functions as art, language does not. So the data for linguistic study are the sentences of the everyday world for which there's no musical counterpart. So in our next lecture, we will actually show a closer uh, language form to music, which is the story plot or the narrative. So which falls within the literature studies, but not language studies. Because music actually functions as art, but the language we speak every day, we use in our daily life, it actually doesn't have these aesthetic functions. It's purely for these utilities. So perhaps poetry or drama or the story or the novels um, have closer link to music in terms of the study of music and linguistic theories. A comprehensive theory of music would account for the totality of the listener's musical intuitions. In GTTM, for the most part, the study is restricted to those components of musical intuition that are hierarchical in nature. So because GTTM adopts the transformational generative grammar from linguistic study, which is hierarchical in nature, therefore, in this theory, the main subjects of consideration in a tonal piece are hierarchical in nature. So other dimensions of musical structure, such as timbre, dynamics, and motivic thematic processes, they are not hierarchical in nature and are not treated directly in the theory as it now stands. Yet these dimensions make crucial contributions to the principles that establish the hierarchical structure for a piece. The theory thus takes into account the influence of non-hierarchical dimensions. So for those, as we acknowledge the hierarchical components in music, we also need to notice that there are other musical dimensions that's also very important to the meaning and the form and constitute of a musical piece, but they are not hierarchical in nature, such as timbre, dynamics, and motivic thematic processes. So in GTTM, although these elements are not treated directly by the theory, but they are under consideration, they are combined in studying the components that's hierarchical in nature. So these elements are actually under the consideration, under general consideration for a piece in the musical analysis using GTTM. So in GTTM, there are 4 hierarchical components entering into the structural description of a piece. So these 4 components are the main subjects of treatment in GTTM. The first is grouping structure. It is a hierarchical segmentation of the piece into motifs, phrases, and sections. So the grouping structure actually describes how we group the musical notes on a musical surface into different groups or chunks, and to form the musical phrases, sections, and motifs. The second is metrical structure. So the events of the piece are related to a regular alternation of strong and weak beats at a number of hierarchical levels. So for any tonal piece, the piece itself has a metrical structure. And This metrical structure features an alternation of strong and weak beats at different hierarchical levels. So we will see more in our examples. Third is the time span reduction. So it assigns to the pitches of the piece a hierarchy of structural importance with respect to their position in grouping and metrical structure. So combining the information from the grouping structure and the metrical structure, we can derive a time span reduction tree that's a hierarchical tree that assigns the different structural importance to the musical notes. And this kind of reduction is a direct adaptation of the generative grammar from linguistic studies. The fourth is prolongational reduction. It assigns to the pitches a hierarchy that expresses harmonic and melodic tension and relaxation, continuity and progression. So in the progression of musical piece, there is also an alternation of tension and relaxation that motivates the piece, that directs the music to certain goals. And this alternation of tension and relaxation can also be described at different hierarchical levels. So an intuitive example for GTTM is given in this picture. So in this picture, we can see that for this tonal music is a musical surface. We actually derived a time span reduction parsing tree here. So this tree actually mimics the constituency grammar or the syntactic parsing tree which we shown in our previous slides. So here, the nodes are assigned of different grouping structures and the metrical structures. So the metrical structures are given by the dots here. So we can see that at the first level, every bit is given the similar metrical importance, and these bits are equally spaced. And at the second level, the first and third bits in every bar is given more importance than the second and fourth bar. So we interpret this as for each bar there are 4 bits, and we interpret it as a strong weak strong weak. So for the beat structure for every bar, we assign the strong weak alternation as strong weak strong weak. And at the third level, we actually consider the first beat more important or stronger than the third beat. Therefore, the downbeat at every bar is given the strongest or the most emphasis in this musical piece. So we can see that in these hierarchical levels of metrical structure, stronger the beat is, the higher the level it is assigned. So for this time span reduction tree, it shows the structural importance or the hierarchies of the different musical notes. For example, here, although the metrical structure, due to the metrical structure, the first beat is stronger than the second one, but based on other factors like the harmony, the melody, the structural importance, here we can see that actually the second beat dominates the first beat, and the second beat has higher branches. And here again, the fourth beat dominates the third one. So in this first bar, the second and the fourth beats are given more structural importance in the parsing tree. And here, for example, here instead, actually the down beat at this bar dominates its neighboring notes here. And we can, for another example, the ending note of this musical phrase here, it actually dominates this entire phrase. So you can see this branch goes higher, and it dominates all other notes in this phrase. But this is dominated by the start of this phrase. So the ending comes here, and the first note, the start of this musical phrase takes over at higher levels. So this tree presents a hierarchy of the musical notes and the importance of them. So we can see that for this piece, for this tonal piece, that eventually the ending note actually dominates everything, because this ending note has the highest structure level, and it dominates the start. And this is one example of how we use GTTM to analyze tonal music from a musical surface. So the story of tonality. Although tonality is often used to refer to Western major and minor keys, tonal music is any music that recognizes a hierarchy, that privileges notes to different degrees. So when we talk about tonal music, we always consider in this narrow definition that refers to Western tonal music or Western classical music that uses major and minor keys. But if we generalize this definition, we can see that tonal music is any music that recognizes a hierarchy. So in this generalized definition, hierarchy is the feature or the defining feature of a music being a tonal music. So this tonal hierarchy is important in creating a sense of musical development or flow, in a way that it creates, because we privilege notes to different degrees, and for tonal music, the most important or the most stable note is the tonal center. So once we have the tonal center, it provides the ultimate stability for this piece. And the tonal center, or we call home, it works as an attraction or a sense of gravity that grabs the music, and it provides the directionality for the musical progressions. And the tonal music is always directed or progress towards the tonal center, the home. So, and also when we assign the different structural importance to the notes in the scale with relation to the tonal center, we create this hierarchy, this relationship that provides momentum for the piece to progress, and we give this certain structure, certain form, so that the music can be understood in a way that's rooted in the hierarchy of the musical scale. So far we talked extensively on how we study music as language, or how we view music from a linguistic perspective. Here, but we can also reverse this metaphor. We can also consider language as music. So what does thinking about language as a kind of music offer? First, uh, if we consider language as music, it highlights the melodiousness and rhythmic character of speech. So when we talk, when we speak, it's not only about the message, the content we convey, but also about how we say it, the tone, the pitch, and the rhythm we use in our language expressions. So it reminds us of the performative and contextual layers, the prosody that modify linguistic meaning. So it's not about what you say, but how you say it. So the way you express it, although it's the same information with different intonational phrasing, with different arrangement or different performative layers, the linguistic meaning can be changed. So it counters the assumption that language is an adequate model of thought, or that propositional attitudes such as believing that or desiring that are most important. So thinking about language as music broadens the view of the language studies. So in this sense, we not only considering the semantic meaning of music, but also the other attributes in a speech, like when we, as human being, when we speak, when we talk, there are also other factors that's from the musical attributes, such as the rhythm, the tone, the pitch, the performance, and all those things play a role in determining the linguistic meaning and the linguistic thought. So this is all for this lecture. We talked about the relationship between music and language, and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening.